Well, hello to you all again and welcome back to your favourite classic dirt bike TV channel. And before we go any further, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all the many brand new subscribers who have recently signed up to Classic Dirt Bike TV. I think our current total is around the 12,300 mark, so thanks to each and every one of you for your continuing support of my channel. Now, as we head towards the end of the racing season here in the UK, we still have one more round for the Scottish Classic Motorcycle Club to take in, and we will attend a couple of the Scottish Twinshock race events before the end of the year. So we still have one or two races still to post here on my channel, and of course in between times we will be filling that in by giving you the very best in old vintage classic dirt bikes. Now we're going to continue that theme right now by taking a look at a quite unusual machine that was built during the lockdown by one of the Scottish classic riders. So right now we're going to take a look at Andrew King's Husqvarna AJS hybrid Twinshocker. Now, the initial idea for Andrew to build this project really started at the end of 2020 when Andrew had an old Husqvarna frame that he'd had lying around in his workshop for about the last 10 years or so. Now, Andrew didn't really want to build another Swedish husky bike because he was looking to try and create something completely different from the run-of-the-mill restorations that people normally come up with when they restore or refurbish these old vintage race bikes. Now, it's probably quite fair to say that Andrew's a bit of a fan when it comes to the old AJS Stormers, and he just so happened to have a spare AJS Stormer motor lying around also in his workshop, so he thought that he would try and fit the British-made engine into the Swedish Husqvarna chassis. Now, naturally, of course, the Swedish frame is never going to accept the British-made two-stroke engine without some modifications, so the right-hand side bottom frame tube was then cut off and then reshaped to allow the motor's gearbox to fit, and of course to make sure that the engine would sit in the chassis at the right height. Now, once again, the Husky frame's foot pegs would also require repositioning to suit the AJS Stormer's right-hand gear lever shifter and of course the motor's much wider engine casings. Now, a further piece of frame tube had to be welded between the bottom two frame rails in order to take the engine's bottom frame mounting. Now, also new engine mounting plates had to be fabricated for the front and rear engine fixings. And these parts, of course, were manufactured by Andrew himself and made of light but quite strong alloy. Now, the motor is basically a stock 250 two-stroke AJS Stormer engine, and it's fitted with Electrex World electronic ignition just to make the bike starting and running a bit more reliable. Now, the engine's carburetor to feed the fuel is an AML 34mm Mark II unit, and naturally this again wasn't a straightforward bolt-on affair because of the rear down tube part of the Husky frame got in the way of the Stormer manifold, so Andrew had to refabricate this angled intake to enable the carburetor and filter to go down the outside of the frame. Now, of course, as you'd expect, the other left-hand side foot peg had to also undergo repositioning as well in order to keep it clear of the Stormer motor and of course to keep the positioning of the footrests just right for the rider. Now, when it came to the bike's exhaust system, Andrew just copied the design from one of his other AJS Stormer bikes, and once again, because the British-made Stormer motor had a central exhaust port, the Husky's front frame down tube was of course right in its path. So once again, Andrew had to develop a sharp turn in the pipe where it fixed onto the barrel to enable it to squeeze past that front frame down tube. Now this was a bit of a headache to get right, Andrew said, and it may not look very pretty, but he says it's still very functional and works reasonably well. And as I said, the remainder of the exhaust expansion chamber is basically just a copy of Andrew's other AJS Stormer bike with this alloy tailpipe bolted on at the rear. Now when it came to the bike's front end, Andrew just used a pair of front forks that came off a Honda XL 250, which he said he just purchased from a seller across the internet. Now the front and rear brake hubs again are just basic AJS Stormer hubs, which are of course reasonably good at slowing the bike down, and there's plenty of them around, so parts are not really a problem for this bike. Now the bike's rear suspension system are a pair of NJB Ultimate Classic units, which once again are quite basic, but still very well suited to this kind of vintage racer. Now the bike's fuel tank is of course not an original Husqvarna item, but this is an actual copy of the 1974 Husqvarna fuel tank, which I'm led to believe are now made in India, because as you're all no doubt aware, original Husqvarna tanks in very good condition are just so hard to come by in these modern times. But the one criticism that Andrew had with these replica tanks is that the internal thread for the fuel tap is a 3/8 BSP thread. So Andrew had to then fit this adapter to take the standard 1/4 BSP thread tap. Now when it came to the bike's side panels, these have been taken from a Matisse motorcycle, and Andrew said he only used these parts because he had an old set lying around the garage that were painted in blue, so he just then went ahead and painted them the same colour of the tank. And apparently, according to the man who mixed up the paint colour, this colour is actually called Volkswagen Tornado Red, although it still all looks very good and it fits together quite nicely. And as far as I'm aware, Andrew is very happy with the way his new project turned out. Now at the business end of the bike, as far as I'm aware, these Renthal handlebars, cables and grips are all basically just your off-the-shelf standard motocross parts, and Andrew's also used a Swedish Gunnar Gasser throttle, and of course these Domina lever covers just to protect the lever pivots from the ingress of dirt, dust and water. And also on this new project, Andrew had to fit the red engine kill switch, which of course is unfortunately mandatory for all bikes that race with the Scottish Classic Club, just in case you maybe get an out of control bike, then that way you can at least kill the motor by pressing this red button. Now I'm pretty sure that many of my YouTubers out there may not agree with Andrew chopping up a perfectly good Husqvarna chassis just to put in a British made two-stroke motor, and I suppose if Andrew did have a spare Husqvarna engine lying around, then maybe he'd have built a completely different kind of machine, or maybe even restored the Husky back to its former glory. But at the end of the day, this was all still smack in the middle of the COVID lockdown, so you really could never blame Andrew for using what he had lying around his workshop at the time. But for me personally, and although this bike does look like a bit of a Frankenstein combination between the Husky frame and the 250 AJS Stormer motor, I still think that the whole bike has been very well put together. And if you want to know just how quick this bike is, then just check out the racing highlights from the Scottish Classic Round 4 event from Lockerbie 2021 to see this bike in action on the racetrack. Well, I do hope you enjoyed that quite brief look around Andrew King's quite unusual hybrid twin shocker with that Husqvarna frame and that British-made AJS motor, but certainly something that you don't see every day, but nevertheless a quite nice looking old bike built by Andrew during the lockdown. Okay, coming up next here on my channel, we will be attending one of the Scottish Twinshock rounds, and that particular event will be in a stubble field in Alloa in the next week or so, and we will be showcasing a few races from that event. Now, we won't be covering every single race, but we certainly will show you one or two races from that event, so I hope you'll join me to take a look at that. But until the next time, of course, everybody continue to be safe and well on those old vintage dirt bikes until we all get together once again to talk about more vintage. I am right here on your favourite Classic Dirt Bike TV channel.